From the Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, this is a Headache Soul production. Welcome to Just the Tip-Sters, America's favorite true crime podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Morgan. With me today is my handsome and talented co-host, Joshua Scab Dr. Bevan.
Oh,
What do I greet Joshua with when he walks in the door? You want to see my scab?
Look at my scab.
Yeah. Want to see my scab?
Oh my God, I'm
so
sorry.
Boiled down, I had a filling in a cavity, and my sweet dentist was trying to avoid a root canal, and it was like a lot. And then I kept pointing to the corner of my mouth, and he's like, "Oh," he thought I was pointing to a tooth, and he's like, "Oh yeah, it's just sensitive now." And I was like, "I can't talk because your hand's out of my mouth." But yeah. So I got home, and then my skin turned brown and started peeling off, and it's like a burn. Would you call it a burn,
Yeah,
doctor?
Because I am the scab doctor.
Yeah, you're the scab doctor.
No, I mean, I think that's what it is.
Kind of like a burn. I can't tell if it's a chemical burn or from one of the tools like being hot. Yeah,
right.
That's sort of what I thought too. It looks like it had a blister, but I'm really proud of myself. I'm healing really quickly.
You're like Wolverine.
I'm definitely Wolverine.
Comic-Con.
Yeah. Aww. I hope Comic-Con goes on. I mean, solidarity with writers and actors, but and a strike is just
it's rough
on everyone and everything.
Yeah.
So I would like to send a shout out to the SCV Board Gamers group in a meetup group.
Oh.
It was terrible, but I'm going back in 2 weeks.
Oh, you went?
I did.
Okay. What'd you play? What was it?
Oh, lordy, Joshua. So I am only
Settlers of Catan?
No, I don't know what that means. So I am more of a trivia-based girl.
Uh-huh.
The guy who organizes it, very sweet man named Jerry, probably mid-40s, and occupational therapist. I don't know if he has kids. I know he's married. I don't really know that much about him. Very sweet guy, very inclusive. I thought he was like a teacher. I was like, "Are you a teacher?" And he goes, "Sort of." And then it turns out he's an occupational therapist.
Cool. Okay.
Really good guy. And every 2 weeks it's the meetup Santa Clarita Valley board game people.
Mm-hmm.
And there were about 20 of us. And Wednesday night it was about 97 degrees and 10 people sat outside. Because they're stupid.
This is at somebody's house, or this is at a
Starbucks?
A Starbucks, okay.
About 10 of us were inside. Everyone was much younger than me, pretty much. The older people were out on the porch. Maybe they're cold. I don't know. But I was with a bunch of young people. They were all really sweet. These were games I'd never played. One was called Night of the Ninja. One was called they're board games of ridiculousness. One was called Splendor. One young man, when we were going around, a lot of people were new, first time there. When we were going around introducing ourselves, he said, "My name is Jeff, just Jeff. I am the most unique Jeff you've ever met because most Jeffs are Jeffrey, but on my birth certificate, it says Jeff."
Nice.
And I go, "Can we call you JJ for just Jeff?"
Just Jeff.
Yeah. And he goes, "Yeah, you can call me whatever you want." But I could tell that didn't really set well. So when it got around to me, I said, "My name is Melissa, also with a J."
Did it get a laugh?
They laughed.
Oh, good. Okay, good.
It was interesting. Jeff is Jewish, but apparently at one point in his life was a member of the FLDS church, and he would go around as a missionary talking to people about the Lord.
Uh-huh.
So he would use people's names as a mnemonic device to remember it. So he said, if I were to come up to Jerry's front door and knock, and he would answer, and I would say, "My name is Jeff. What's your name?" "Jerry." "Oh, that's great. Jerry with a J, just like mine." "Yeah. You know who else spells her name with a J? Jesus."
Oh, that guy.
I'm like, I think I have not found my people, but...
Oh, no?
I did not.
You're not...
No, they were all really sweet.
You didn't connect with the former Mormon missionaries?
Jewish Mormon missionary? No, I didn't. They all very sweet. Everyone was so inclusive. I did not understand what was happening most of the time. The last game, Splendor. It was about like trading gems. It was absolutely terrible. Everybody caught on much faster than me. And at the end, I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. And one person goes, well, you could buy that card and then you would win. I'm like, out. So I bought that card and I'm like, I win. I won by complete attrition because I did not know what I was doing. So anyway, hoping the next one is a little bit more trivia based or something. Because I'd never heard of any of these board games. The originator dude apparently has about 300 games.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. I went thinking I was going to be some hero. I donated a bunch of games because Mark and I used to be the game night hosts.
Right.
And I was like, I don't feel like hosting game night anymore. I'll just get, some of them hadn't been opened.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, we'll see if I'm going back the next time because I did meet some really cool people from all over, like people who'd moved from the Bay Area down here, people that lived in like West Hollywood moved here.
Cool.
So that's fun, huh?
Yeah.
Good times.
Good job getting out.
That's what I was doing. Also, it was free.
Spots.
Yeah. It was free.
I mean,
and that's what I was trying to do, just like meet new people. And everyone is much younger than me, and I'm just like whatever.
That's tough, and I'm I admire you.
Well, thank you. That's very sweet. I just love board games.
Sure.
I didn't expect to be the oldest person there, but they were all, like I said, super nice.
I'm going to memorize all of the Trivial Pursuit cards, so then I feel like really smart on board game night.
And then go to the SCV meetup group.
Yeah,
and then
they won't play it.
Yeah.
Trivial Pursuit. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty much. Oh yeah, at some point I will tell the Tip-Sters about my experience auditioning for a game show last week.
Oh right.
Yeah, it was pretty fun. I did terribly. Let's give you the heads up right now.
Spoiler alert.
But it was so much fun. It was terrible and fun at the same time. So a lot going on today in true crime. Today is Friday, July 14th. And it was announced early this morning that Suffolk County Police or Sheriff's Office had arrested someone in the Lisk case, Lisk, Long Island serial killer.
Oh, got it.
And what's so fascinating to me is the number of theories about who this was, what it was, why. I think some people are going to be proven to have some good deductive reasoning, and some people are going to be proven, I couldn't have been more off base. There have been so many docuseries done on Oxygen, ID Network. I can probably tell you 5 right now, and most of them are really well done. The thing that meant the most to me was the Murder Accountability Project, MAP, because out of that came this organization. It's a nonprofit, and it's a guy who was a journalist who worked for the New York Times. I think it was the New York Times. And then he got a buyout to retire early. And no, Scripps Howard. He wrote for Scripps Howard and got a buyout and retired early and used his brilliant computer skills to organize zeros and ones and came up with a map that showed the likelihood of a serial killer in an area.
Whoa.
And he actually helped to identify and get arrested a serial killer in Gary, Indiana.
Wow.
He tracked down 6 or 7 victims and said, it all points to this guy. And they brought him in for questioning. He's like, oh, yeah, I did those. Also, there's 6 more bodies stacked in an abandoned barn you don't know about.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you can actually, the software for the Murder Accountability Project is available free online. If you want to put in like your zip code or your town, you can see what they've done. It's a bunch of smart computer people.
It sounds like I don't want to do that.
Yeah, you probably don't
want to know.
Except that we live in an area where and it's not a lot.
I don't know.
It's not a lot.
But
you got to take my word for it.
Isn't it like the most unlikely spot? Oh, did you look it up already?
No.
Oh.
Because I don't care.
Okay.
No, I don't think. I appreciate Joshua's forethought, being a father of 3 boys, but I feel like it's not really a thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it could
either way, I'm not looking it up.
It's not.
Because the only thing that's going to happen there is I'm going to scare the shit out of myself.
Right. Do you ever look up the sex offenders?
No,
I've done that numerous times. When we lived in Van Nuys, when we lived here, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
Now, also bad not complete information. A lot of those are people that were 18 who had 17-year-old girlfriends.
Sure.
It doesn't mean they were pedophiles. It meant that they were
Right.
dating someone underage, and they were just barely overage.
Well, I can tell you a story at some point about
I don't want to hear it.
how I came close to
I don't want to
having
hear
to
it.
make the
Don't
list.
tell me. Don't tell me. Please don't tell. I don't want to know. Did it happen last week?
No, it was a drunken streaking event and had streaking. Yeah.
Why would that be
because it was
Did you trip and fall into a vagina?
No, public nudity.
Oh.
If you get convicted of a certain level of that, you have to register.
As a sex offender?
That's what I was told. I don't know. They might have been just trying to scare me.
I think so. That's not a sex offender thing. That's like a drunken weirdo.
Yeah, no, it was drunken debauchery and
right.
But
wow.
But
okay.
Yeah.
Well, the story was broken by News 12 in Long Island, and I found out at 5:10 a.m. today because I'd forgotten to turn the volume off on my cell phone. And Tipster Suzanne, who lives 2 hours east of us, and it was, like 7:10 her time, says I got an alert, and I was like, what? And I wake up and I'm like, well, that's worth waking up for.
Nice.
It's worth waking up for. Yeah. So yeah, I was happy to find out because this case and the beautiful and awful thing about this case is that it was really broken wide open in 2010 by Shannon Gilbert. And Shannon is most likely not a victim of his. It could be proven maybe later she was, but the police actually just believe she had a psychotic episode and she drowned. So Shannon, in May of 2010, beautiful 24-year-old Shannon Gilbert was a sex worker. There used to be something, I don't know if they still have it, it's called Back Pages or something, and you could get women.
Craigslist.
Yes.
But yeah.
It's Craigslist, but I think it's called Back Page
or
Back Pages.
All of that shut down a few years ago.
Okay, all right.
Like all online, there was a big uproar. It was a few years ago. The laws changed, and so none of that can happen anymore.
Okay, but it used to be.
But yeah, that was one of the
place for people to go.
Yeah,
and Shannon was a beautiful woman who was trying to pay the bills, and she, was very desirable, I'm sure, but she had some mental health issues, which that's not really shocking. And she was with a customer who was, rich and a little bit shady. And she was on the phone for like 20 minutes with 911. I didn't understand why it took so long. She ended up leaving that residence, Oak Beach, very fancy part of Long Island, I guess, and ran next door to an elderly man's house. He is a widower, lived alone, he's like in his 80s, knocked on his door and said, help me, he's trying to kill me. So when police got there, he's the one that directed them. She ran off in the dark across the highway to the beach closer to the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And they were looking for her and couldn't find her. And then they kept looking for her and they found the remains of someone else. Oh. And then they found 3 more remains of someone else.
Oh,
and then they found more remains. And then they found remains of a man dressed as a woman. And then they found remains of an infant next to a woman.
Oh, my God.
And then the last body found was Shannon Gilbert's.
Wow.
Yeah. But in the meantime, they found the place that a serial killer had dumped, I hate that word, had put whatever, lots of women in the brushy area, near Gilgo Beach.
Wow.
Yeah. Like a dense kind of, the stuff that grows on the beach that's hard to get through. I mean, you'd have to take a machete. And it was just, I can't even believe. A lot of people had theories that the person had to be a teacher, like worked fall, winter, spring, but had the summers off. I think because of the times, the times that people were, there were thoughts that the person was a landscaper because of specific bags that were found near somebody's, like bags that contained wood chips or mulch.
Okay.
People turned in brothers, husbands, boyfriends, sons. Yep. Well, it's always like right under your nose, isn't it? 59-year-old architect Rex Howerman.
Oh, wow.
Fancy Pants lives in a close-knit community with his wife and 2 children.
Jeez.
His neighbor said, this is mind-boggling that the quiet 59-year-old could be involved. He was known to do outdoor activities a lot with woodworking. Yeah. Here's Rex. I just want you to see his picture.
Oh my God.
That's from Restoration Hardware Magazine.
He was a feature article.
Standing on a bridge in New York. And this is the bottom half of the picture. He's got a Rolex.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he's got a Rolex on his wrist. It looks like the bodies were dumped about 16 miles from his home. So, he lived in Massapequa on First Avenue. And if it shows this map of where the bodies were found, and it looks like you took like a straight route down to the beach. And all I can tell you is that I am so sad that we're recording this at this time because I want so much to talk about this, but the press conference is set for today at 4 p.m. Eastern. So it'll be 1 p.m. our time. But, by the time you hear this, it'll be probably a couple of weeks from, and we'll know more. But I can't wait. I mean, the press conference is going to be in front of the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office. So there'll be the Suffolk County DA, Suffolk County Sheriff, as well as representatives from New York State Police and the FBI. Wow. So big day in the world of true crime. And now transitioning to something that is, I have teased poor Joshua with this for like a week. It's so kind of not true crime, but it is kind of true crime. It doesn't always have to be about murder.
But
does it?
But it doesn't have to, but that's what I've come to expect.
I see. Sometimes I make a left turn.
I'm like Siren. When I walk through the door, I want to
jump on my testicles.
I want to hear murder or kidnapping. She just wants her treat so she can go in the corner.
Upstairs. No, she wants to jump on Uncle Joshua's genitals, and then she wants her treat.
We all have these Pavlovian responses when we walk in.
Sure. Yeah. Treat or jump on nuts or whatever. Yeah. So this it is kind of true crime related, but it's not. So what started me down this rabbit hole was people theorizing on terrible, terrible websites that Bob Ross was a serial killer and that he painted all of his little pictures where all of his bodies were buried.
Okay. And that was just silly rumor or whatever.
Yes.
Okay.
Bob Ross is not a serial killer.
I don't know that I ever heard that one. Like I heard Fred Rogers was a sniper, Marine, sharpshooter or something.
Or a minister. But same thing.
Okay. So that's one of those silly things.
Yeah. All and it upset me greatly. I'm like, Bob Ross was not a serial killer who painted happy little trees where he had planted people underneath them.
Oh my God.
That did not happen. So that's what started me down the rabbit hole. Okay. So people had told me about this documentary and I was like, it was from 2 years ago. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll watch it one day. And I finally watched it a couple weeks ago. So most of this information is from the documentary as well as Michael Schulman, who wrote a beautiful article in August of 2021 in the New York Times. And it was sort of after the documentary came out and he sort of fleshed out a few more things. And I know I can hear Mark Humphreys in my ear and I can hear Joshua in my other ear saying, documentaries have an agenda.
Oh, sure.
I felt it. You were like wanting to say it.
No, I mean, I'm waiting for the thing, but sure.
So what's interesting about this documentary, it's called Bob Ross, Happy Accidents, Betrayal, and Greed.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
His life is so much more interesting than I could have ever imagined.
Oh, really?
And not only purposeful, it was crafted partially by him and partially by people who saw a product that they wanted to be a part of. It's an interesting, fascinating, terrible story, the way it turned out. But I mean, I can't believe he passed away when he was 52, because from my memory as a kid, he was 52 his whole life. He was old.
He was old when he was starting. Yeah.
I think it was because he was an outdoorsy dude and was like, maybe had thin skin and, was like he looked weathered.
Yeah.
And he was definitely an outdoorsman. So I started down this rabbit hole, and I guess I should say thank you to the conspiracy fuckers, because that's the only reason that I looked into this, and it became so much more fascinating. I feel like the people that think Bob Ross is a serial killer, the same people who think that Wayfair packs children into their cabinets.
Oh boy.
To send to pedophiles. So I'm going to call this Rossgate 2023. Even though the documentary came out in 2021, I still to this day see things. It's like Bob Ross was a serial killer, and all his paintings showed where every painting was almost the same.
The same painting every day.
Jesus Christ. And the reason I think that
it probably wasn't. It was. That's probably like really reductive art critic of me to think, oh, it's the same painting.
But it kinda. Yeah. But kinda. Yeah. I mean, there are art critics who say he never developed outside of this one kind of thing, and it was because he loved nature and out of doors. He befriended every animal. He had squirrels. There's a video of him sitting and squirrels crawling on him like, hey, Dad.
Oh, wow.
I mean, every animal, it didn't matter. He spent 12 years in Alaska. A lot of what he painted was scenes he remembers from Alaska.
And they're all real scenery, like from memory.
Yeah.
See, that's amazing.
It is to me, too.
It's not like he just made up, oh, let's put a mountain here and a tree here and whatever, river, creek this way, like some imaginary thing. He was painting for reals.
He added some things, but it was things he remembered.
Those are the happy accidents.
Yeah, those are the happy accidents with the bodies underneath them. But it was based on his time in Alaska.
That's crazy cool.
Yeah, he loved living in Alaska. He was in the military. He was a master sergeant in the Air Force from 1961 to 1981. And he and his first wife, Jane, had one son, Steve. Steve is still with us, and Steve is the one kind of suffering in my mind from all of the terrible greed and shit. So this director, Joshua Rofe, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, R-O-F-E with an accent, Rofe.
Okay.
Yeah. He had done one previous docuseries, and it was about Lorena Bobbitt.
Oh, wow.
And Michael Schulman from New York Times is like, oh my God, what the fuck could Bob Ross have done so bad? Can't you just leave this guy in peace? Why do you have to are there any good men left? But it's more the other side. They show Bob Ross as a human being, but still a really good human being. The thing that fascinated me is two of the three producers are Melissa McCarthy and her husband, Ben Falcone.
Oh, okay.
And I know every documentary has an agenda, and it may feel like that it's trying to turn this couple, the Kowalskis, into monsters, and they kind of are. They started from a good place, but let's go back. So Bob Ross gets out of the military, retires from the military. He was just really quite done, according to his son Stephen. Okay. And this is my favorite part of this whole damn documentary. He had the most beautiful head of straight hair.
Oh, no.
Beautiful, beautiful straight hair. And all the pictures shared by his family, he went through like an Elvis stage. He went through like a long hair stage. His hair was gorgeous. And then he discovered perms.
Yeah.
And all the years that he had those perms, I thought, this poor man, I mean, he's so sweet and kind. His parents must just be terrible humans to have passed on that genetic trait of a Brillo on his head. No,
okay, you thought
I did.
I did know that was a perm. Like
I didn't.
I didn't. I mean, I don't know how I knew. I think you could. I think maybe,
you could see. I am naive.
Maybe my hair dar is
your
very
hair dar. Yeah, Joshua has very accomplished hair dar. Yeah. Melissa does not.
Yeah,
I can tell you a toupee from a mile away.
Oh, sure.
But
mine looks realistic though.
It does look good.
I fooled you this.
You did the whole time. Wait, take it off.
It's glued. It's
got
the spearmint.
Spearmint? No, I don't want to hear about it. Anyway, yeah. So he had this beautiful hair, and he just fucked it up for like many years. Okay, so what was so cute is that he was on the Regis and Kathy Lee show showing them within an hour with commercials how to paint, and they did okay. I mean, when you have someone kind of taking you step by step, but he Regis is, was known to be an asshole. And he's like, is that your real hair? And he goes, well, only my hairdresser and I know. And then when he would go, I know,
Nice.
which is hilarious because you just explained you have a hairdresser. So
Right.
why would you have that unless you have a fucking perm? He would go every 2 months to get it fixed, and he would call it tightening the springs.
Yes.
Is that not the cutest thing? That was my favorite part. It made me a little, my opinion of that terrible hair softer. Because when you see the pictures of him, you're like, why would you touch that?
Okay.
Like, since he was like a teenager, his hair was beautiful. So
wow.
yeah, I don't know why he did that, but he had this, glorious head of hair. But yeah, getting his springs tightened. So he was on lots of TV shows. He was on like Joan Rivers, Regis and Kathy Lee, The Today Show, and he would do all of this stuff to show people how to paint just like him. And he did this, every week on PBS. And it was like, I know you youngsters probably don't remember this, but, Bob Ross has become like kind of a cultural icon. Like he shows up in like The Family Guy and The Simpsons. Sure. And if you have a person painting with curly hair with a soft voice, you're pretty sure it's Bob Ross.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's Bob Ross. He retires in 1981 from the military, and he is trying to figure out what to do other than feed squirrels. So he's watching PBS one day, and he catches this German guy, Bill Alexander, and he had a show on PBS called The Magic of Oil Painting. And Bob, was like, I love this guy. He's terrific. And he starts showing up. And one of the things that breaks my heart, because later on Bill Alexander said he ripped me off, there's actually video of a PBS show where he hands his like spatula and brush to Bob. It's like he's handing it off. Wow. And yet, so we'll get to that in a minute. So Bill Alexander, God bless him, was this like very boisterous, outgoing dude, but he was German. I don't care who you are. When you're German, it just sounds like you're giving Hitler's Reichstag speech all the time. So he's like, yelling at people to paint and to do. It just sounds very angry and aggressive. And he's like very polarizing. You either liked him or you didn't. And Bob adored him. But Bob becomes part of his stable and is like a touring instructor because Bill had, he didn't develop this technique. He borrowed it from the 15th century, but he's one of the first people to kind of bring it to the, consciousness of the world. It's called alla prima, which means first attempt. So what it is you would prime your canvas with this, primer sealer stuff called gesso. So instead of letting it dry, he would just start painting on it wet.
Okay, so normally or before that, you'd put primer on, you'd let it dry, and
then paint,
and so
especially with the oil painting.
Hours.
Yeah, I don't know how long it would take to dry, but that wasn't, but it was actually a 15th century thing, which I love, but he brings it back in the 70s and he, he's like yelling at me, like, paint this flower like this. And I mean, he's smiling. He's an older guy and he's smiling. But if you're like, watching it, you're like, why is grandpa yelling at me? Right. It just was like overwhelming. So something else that was fascinating is that Bob Ross made the conscious effort to be the anti-Bill Alexander.
Okay, so he developed his softness as a
counterpoint to Bill.
Okay.
So he gets handed the television show The Joy of Painting.
Okay.
Which, by the way, also carefully crafted after The Joy of Sex.
Oh, okay.
Which came out in the late 70s. Okay. This is now the early 80s. He is talking in his quiet voice known as a liquid tranquilizer.
Mm-hmm.
And here's something I also respect about him greatly. And maybe you know this, Joshua, but when I was going to college, being petrified of trying to talk into a microphone in radio or make a presentation, I was told by many people older than me, imagine you're talking to one person.
Sure.
Some people use like a device like imagine you're seeing everyone in their underwear. I didn't really like that one. But if you can imagine, yeah, you because you're you. I tried to imagine. It's like imagine you're telling your best friend a story, and it's much more relatable, I guess. And so he imagined that he was talking to one woman in bed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was pretty fascinating.
Okay.
Pretty fascinating. I mean, it was definitely a technique, and it was one of those things I respected about him because I don't know if someone told him to do that. I think he consciously made the effort. I think he looked at Bill Alexander and was like, he is kind of loud and brusque, and he's very joyous and boisterous, but it's the delivery that can be a little harsh. So I think he made the conscious effort. And to me, somebody had to tell me. And I loved radio my whole life, knew I wanted to be in radio. And when someone gives you this like gem of a piece of information, like just say it like you're talking to your best friend.
Right.
I was like, oh, and I feel like he got that innately. I don't know if someone told him, but teaching people to paint while, and you're in a studio with camera people and it's cold. It was in a house in Muncie, Indiana, and they had like a black sheet covering the fireplace. I mean, it was so like rudimentary and archaic, and yet it's this thing in our collective consciousness, It's like amazing. I am amazed. This is a slight left turn. Amazed at the things that PBS created around the country. So I had no idea Bob Ross was, filming in a PBS studio in Muncie, Indiana.
Yeah, no idea.
If you ask your grandmother if they ever watched on PBS Lilius Yoga and You, she will probably say yes. Your grandmother or your mother, depending on how old. My grandmother and my mother both watched it. Found out, I don't know, in my 30s when I lived in California, that was shot in Cincinnati.
Oh, wow.
When I started to get into yoga and take yoga teacher training, I'm like, Lilius was from right around, and for 28 years or something.
Right.
And she was on like a really ridiculous like wooden platform and wearing like back in the old days like tights and then like a bodysuit, like old, like a little girl going to dance class. And her long hair in a braid went down her back, married, mother of 2 or 3 kids, housewife who did yoga and then becomes this PBS person. Wow. I was like, holy shit. It's interesting, the stuff that's like, filmed or developed in the Midwest and yet catches on.
Sure.
Both that and Bob Ross's, The Joy of Painting were in like 30 countries.
Yeah. Yes. Well, a lot of stuff. Yeah. A lot of PBS stuff just took the world.
Fascinated. Yeah. I'm fascinated by it. But so here's Bob, he's this, somewhat flirty guy who's, married and loves his wife, loves his son, brings his son. There's lots of video in the documentary of him bringing his son in. Like, I tried to teach my son, but here this young man paints much better trees than I ever will. And I mean, it's like, it's very sweet. The documentary is sweet. I don't care if you think it has a agenda or not. So here's Bob, and there's actually all of these internet sites with like the wisdom of Bob Ross after he passed away. I can't believe it. It's like you could use these quotes in like a meditation class or in a yoga class.
Okay.
So I love these little things. It's interesting to hear his voice and see him saying it, see how it comes out of his mouth in person in this documentary.
Oh, okay.
Because I didn't really watch the show. I don't know if it was like sort of before my time or it ran, for a long time.
Yeah, I was going to say it's before and after everybody's time. Like it ran forever.
Right. But it was, sort of like you would think your parents would watch it or something. So here's Bob, the philosopher. He's like, these are happy little paintings. If you want to be sad, watch the news.
Yeah.
I didn't expect to like fall in love with him, but I really did. I really fell in love with him with this. And it isn't just the TV shows where you think someone is like a part of their personality is like amped up to be on TV. It was the video of him being a goofball and talking to animals and, hugging his son and ruffling his son's hair. Sweet. And his son's like, he just always had a thing for hair. He just always had a thing for, he said he was always like, had his hands in your hair or pulling your hair. And, Steve had cute hair for a kid in the 80s also. It was very cute. I love that he would say things like, there are no mistakes, just happy accidents.
Happy accidents, yeah. I've heard that.
That's like the sweetest thing.
Yeah.
And he was trying to make art accessible to everyone. He was, he considered it like therapy.
Sure.
Yeah, if you could afford, a brush and a canvas, you could have therapy.
Yeah, I like that.
The show The Joy of Painting debuts in 1983. And what really broke my heart from the New York Times article, not from the documentary, because they show Bill Alexander, but they don't. He may have passed away before because he was older then. But in a 1991 New York Times article, Bill Alexander said, he betrayed me. Uh-oh. I invented wet on wet. I trained him and he copies me. What bothers me is not just that he betrayed me, but that he thinks he can do it better.
But he's just doing a style of painting and a style of making a television show. It's not, he didn't steal anything.
No. And Bill Alexander's, most of his paintings were flowers. It's a similarity, but I guess, so the author from the New York Times, Michael Schulman, says, Bill Alexander missed the point. It was Ross's, sweet, placid persona and his soothing voice that made him very alluring, and that's when it came out, he pretended he was talking to one woman in bed. Yeah. Yeah. And even his son, Steven, says, you know what? He was practicing that sometimes. He was trying to be a little bit sexy.
I can hear that now. Like now that you said it, I don't think I would have pulled that
right
ever, but I'm also not the target audience for that.
You're not a middle-aged woman who's really into perm men.
No, but I think, now that you say that, and he's putting on sexy voice.
A little bit. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think Bill Alexander got even more upset because Bob Ross surpassed him so fast and so much.
It sounds like jealousy.
It does.
And hater because of, because he was
younger and sexy. And don't get me wrong, Bill Alexander wasn't trying to be sexy. He looked like a guy that owned a deli. like pants like with the belt up under your chest and short and squat and gray hair and yelling in German and happy yelling in German. And mostly he was a good painter, don't get me wrong. Right. But they had very, very different styles. It was just the prep style of the wet on wet quote first attempt alla prima painting that And it's not like Bill Alexander invented that. It was from the 15th century. Right. So I'm trying not to be like bitter and jaded about him. So among some of the beautiful things that Bob Ross said, in my mind, this is a total precursor to Malcolm Gladwell's outlier theory. He said, talent is just a pursued interest. If you keep at it, you will become talented.
Yeah, nice.
So I have often wondered about Malcolm Gladwell's book Outlier, because I read it a long time ago when it came out, and I thought, if anyone spends 10,000 hours on something, you can, become a success. So I adore Malcolm Gladwell. He's a fascinating writer, but I kept thinking there has to be a flaw in this theory. There has to be a flaw. And I don't know that there's like a flaw. There are some people who absolutely disagree with Malcolm Gladwell. It's like, so the outlier theory is that, success is the result of like having an innate talent, but it's also a combination of like opportunities in your cultural background.
Oh, okay. So you're not just saying to hone a craft, but to become successful in that craft.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know that that's automatically true. I think I agree with you that 10,000 hours you're going to get expert
Better.
level,
Mm-hmm.
good at it, but then whatever industry or whatever, there's still luck and
Yeah.
all of these
That's it. Thank you.
who
Yeah.
and all the different things
Exactly.
involved, for sure.
Yeah. So I think that's a beautifully stated way to put it, Joshua. It's sometimes there's luck or a blessing or lightning striking or a magic you can't describe, and that may have been Bob Ross, which you'll see later, the people that come into his life that end up kind of taking over. That's sort of what they said. So Malcolm Gladwell thinks that if you put in a significant amount of time and effort and you have access to certain opportunities that others may not have, you will become successful. And, some people disagree with that. It's like, it's not just talent, it's hard work and effort. It's, I kind of hate but you can't discount it. It's like the opportunities that certain cultural backgrounds, have that can be impactful on someone's quote unquote talent.
Right.
I mean, if you think about like Venus and Serena Williams, their dad taking them to like public courts.
Yeah.
And, they probably spent more than 10,000 hours.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So I feel like Bob Ross boiled things down. Like if you want to be talented, talent is just a pursued interest. I just love that that's how he thought. I get it. That's maybe a little too simplistic, but I also loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it. So a couple named Annette and Walt Kowalski, they meet Bob. Annette meets Bob at one of his painting classes, and he went all over the country teaching these classes, at first with Bill Alexander and then with, his own joy of painting. And Annette was getting over the loss of a son. So she meets Bob. Now, she's already older than him. They're both married. I don't exactly understand what happened, but they spent a lot of time together. And it was thought that they were having an affair. Now, that's what they say in the documentary, which, by the way, the Kowalskis did not participate in, and I don't even know if they're still alive. They probably are. I know the foundation is run by, and by foundation, I mean RBI or BRI, which is Bob Ross International.
Okay.
So their daughter runs it now. And they have
Bob Ross's daughter?
No,
the Kowalskis. Daughter. Okay.
Bob Ross only had the one son, and he lost big time. So Annette was like, you know what? I'm taking this class from this guy to get over the loss of a son, and whatever he has, I think we ought to bottle it.
Oh, okay. So she ends up pushing the business end of it. Is that what? Okay, I got you.
She and Walt were probably already retired, but they're like, this guy has a lot of commercial potential. And she's like, whatever this guy, that's the magic I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Whatever the magic is, we need to, bottle it. And they do.
Okay.
Sadly. They become instructors, more Annette than Walt. And Jane was his second wife. His first wife, Vivian, actually appears for I don't even know why she's in it. She's in it for just a couple of seconds, and she sits down on a couch, and it's like, this is Bob's first wife, Vivian. I'm sure there was more footage with her, but they cut it out. And she's the mother of Stephen.
So
his second wife, Jane, who he was married to the longest, I think Stephen feels like Jane was kind of more than a stepmom, like that she was a mom.
Oh, good. Okay.
And he feels like Jane was the love of Bob's life. And that's true.
Good. Okay.
And she died of cancer in 1991. There's a weird kind of scene. It's animated where Jane is like sitting, an animated version of Jane is sitting on the toilet and smoking a cigarette, and Stephen walks by And she goes, Stephen, you're the only person who loves me.
Oh,
because she was more than suspicious that Annette and Bob were sleeping together. Bob kind of admitted it, but never really publicly. Stephen vouches for that. Bob's best friend, who's also in the documentary, who's a very sweet, adorable, loyal person, said, well, I guess Stephen will answer that. You know how sometimes
he pushed it. Okay.
Not an answer is an answer.
Yeah.
So the Kowalskis deny that Annette and Bob ever had an affair.
Okay.
I think it's pretty clear. Just in the old footage, you can see how they acted around each other.
Okay.
And it's different than friends and business partners.
Okay.
It's just different. But I could be wrong. She's the only one left to deny it, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So he is kind of considered by other artists and art critics to be the foremost purveyor of kitsch. And I know it's terrible. Most artists are like, oh, he's an embarrassment to the art world. It's a little bit heartbreaking, but he, basically is over top of this $1 million empire of classes, art supplies, how-to books. And the New York Times had a artist visit a paint company in Soho, which is where, he was teaching a class. And there was, Bob Ross merch that she says was hidden in the corner. And she said, I called it pizzeria art.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Her name was Alexandra Stanley. And she said, I'm horrified by art instruction on television. It's terrible. Bad, bad, bad. They're just commercial exploiters, non-artists teaching other non-artists. But I don't think that was he didn't even care about money at the time. When he started this, it was like, I need to bring the joy of painting to the masses. It's been such great therapy for me after retirement, and I didn't know what to do with my life.
Yeah, that feels like the art piece, a performance, whatever piece.
Yeah.
You're bringing the joy of doing the thing to a mass audience. That absolutely is art.
Yeah.
Is the scenery
is it
spectacular?
Right.
No, probably not. But who cares? Like, that's not the thing. The thing is,
yeah, you're right. You're right.
It's it is the joy of painting.
Yes. Yeah. And it's not like, so that you can become a rich person painting only scenes of trees in Alaska.
Yeah.
Or creeks or ponds or mountains or whatever.
Yeah.
I love that he thought it was like a form of therapy that was available to anybody who had a canvas and a brush. Like, he didn't want people to spend a lot of money on shit. I'm quite sure when the Kowalskis stepped in and offers came in, your head could be turned by that,
Yeah.
So he got sick, I think it was in 1993, and he had Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Oh,
he was only 52 years old when he died in 1994. And it was kept so quiet. I think the Kowalskis thought if it, was shown that he passed away, that their, money would dry up. But they really shouldn't have worried, because they just took over everything. Stephen says, Bob's son, they just wanted the whole kit and caboodle, not a part of it, just the whole kit and caboodle, which is, kind of heartbreaking. A few months before he died, he's in a hospital in Florida, and he marries a nurse, I think just as a way to transfer something into her name.
Oh.
And to protect, honestly, it was to protect Stephen and his younger brother, Jimmy. So those are the only two family members he has left. And he'd wanted somebody other than the Kowalskis to have a lot of money.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just, he signed some papers, Jimmy signed some papers, and because of that, the Kowalskis have everything.
Oh, it didn't work.
No.
He tried to save, and that backfired, and made it so the Kowalskis stole it all.
Yep.
Oh.
And Stephen fought a lengthy court battle, but it, ultimately he didn't win, and he ran out of money to keep appealing.
Oh, God.
It was 2019. He gave up. He lost his lawsuit against BRI, and he couldn't fund an appeal. And what was ironic is his attorney was an attorney for the company that Bill Alexander was a part of and repped. And this person saw Bob Ross's estate being pillaged. But there were signed legal documents that you couldn't fight, you know? On his deathbed, Stephen says that, you know, Bob was pressured by the Kowalskis to sign over his name, his likeness, and that he was like, nope, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. That's why he married. He was, you know, like down to 85 pounds and he had no hair and he was wearing a perm wig.
No.
Yeah. He married a nurse named Linda and he was just like, you know, trying to find a way to preserve his name. And Stephen said he walked into his father's hospital room one day and, you know, Bob was never known to be a screamer, even before he started, you know, speaking softly.
Yeah.
He said he was screaming into the phone, "You're not getting my name. You're not getting my name."
Oh, man.
So Annette and Walt, as BRI, they sued Linda and Bob's half-brother Jimmy for paintings and other physical objects, including down to the palette he used while on TV.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. So this is the part that's heartbreaking. Bob Ross left a majority of interest in his trust to his brother Jimmy, and then Jimmy turned it over to the Kowalskis in 1997. We don't know why or how that happened, if he didn't understand what was going on, but Jimmy did not appear in the documentary, and he said, that really didn't happen, but I am not going to say anything because I don't want to be sued. The Kowalskis will sue you if you look at them wrong.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. It was like really like ugly and unattractive. And, you know, I didn't know everything that happened with Bob Ross's life. I mean, there's like a handwritten note in a legal file from like 1993 where Walt Kowalski is like, look, we're going to make bookmarks, coffee mugs, Christmas ornaments, waffle makers, a Bob Ross Monopoly board. And the author, Michael, says the thing that got me was the Bob Ross soap on a rope. Right. And Annette Kowalski saying, you know what? Socks and toasters and waffle makers, Bob would have loved this.
Oh, boy. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Sure.
Okay. So I didn't know all of this happened in Bob Ross's life. And when you see his son, who probably isn't much older than he was when he died, and maybe even younger, he has been through a hard time.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you one thing. He stopped painting for many, 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 many years. And then I think it was after he lost the lawsuit in 2019, he picked back up a brush and they show him in a little, you know, like guest house or garage that's been renovated. And he is painting again.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good.
And I know that every documentary has an agenda. I do believe the producers and the director tried to show both sides, but you can't help but think the, you know, Kowalskis come off as assholes.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a true crime, but let's just say Bob Ross is not a serial killer. He was a guy
that we know of.
Stop it. He's a guy that enjoyed painting naturescapes and didn't even care about money, but, you know, ended up being a cultural icon.
Yeah.
And I'm, you know, maybe one day Steve will get some sort of, I'm just, I don't want to, I can't talk about the greed. I'm going to throw up a little bit.
Yeah, no. And I'm sitting here wondering, okay, step one is I'm not going to buy Bob Ross International licensed stuff.
Me too. That's what I thought too.
Like, I'm not going to, I mean, if from this, I'm not going to support Bob Ross International because that's not, but how, I wonder what the next level solution is. How do we, support Steve in getting what he really deserves?
He teaches painting classes all over the country.
Okay.
He and Bob's best friend.
Oh, good.
So I think he's happy. I don't think he's rich, but I think he's happy.
Okay.
He's kind of, picked up his father's mantle. He's obviously not going to be as successful, or not into this moment. He hasn't been.
Sure.
But you can see the relief in his face.
Okay.
There's a video of him sitting at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a cigarette. And someone, I don't know if it's the director or someone off camera, says, "How do you feel?" And he says, "Tired." And he said, "I've been wanting to tell this story for a long time." So I think it was an opportunity, for him to talk about it. And they really did a great job of collecting old video, old pictures showing Bob's entire life, the good, the bad, and the ugly. If he had an affair with Annette Kowalski, who cares?
Sure.
He's a human being, man. Doesn't mean all the things he did were, not worth anything.
Right.
So, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
It was a little bit of a true crime.
I mean, well, and you exposed the untruth of
he's not a serial killer, people.
A crime.
Yeah, not a serial killer. But if you have a tip on a missing person or unsolved homicide, or you just want to suggest a case, please give us a call at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837. You can email us at jttipsters@gmail.com. You can find us on any of the social media platforms. That's just the Tip-Sters Facebook page, at JT-Tipsters on Instagram, at JT-Tipsters-Pod on Twitter, and more cowbell.
If you would like to support this podcast and get early access and other cool murderous swag, go to patreon.com/justthetipsters.